This week on the Walk On podcast, how did you keep going when you're trying to figure out this world of being an influencer and social media, yet you're getting job rejections and putting yourself out there for people? How do you keep going when you encounter those hiccups?
I think I've been fortunate that whenever there's been a rejection, there's always been a reason that felt like came shortly after. It was like, oh, this is why. Like the bigger picture of had I done that, I'm sure there would have been great things that would have happened, but this thing that's happening right now wouldn't have happened either.
Hello and welcome to the Walk On podcast. This is the final episode of season 3. It's hard to believe that the episodes are piling up, but they are, and we're having a ton of fun. If you're new here, just a quick insight that the Walk On podcast really is about hearing from people who are living with purpose and passion, and they're letting those values drive their leadership. And it started from a place of I was trying to figure out what's next for me in my career. And so it's been a great opportunity to just listen to people, ask questions, and introduce you, the listener, to them and their experiences. And so we continue with a great guest today. I've known Hope Breen for a few years now. She wears many, many hats, as good entrepreneurs do. Hope is a producer on 92.5 WBEE, the Bee Morning Coffee Club. She's a Rochester and Finger Lakes tourism influencer, a marketing pro. Perhaps she's most known for her ROC the City with Hope social media accounts, which Hope's going to correct me on the number, I hope. But she's garnered more than 1 million views on YouTube alone for some of her posts. And so she's quite influential. And I can't wait to learn today what an influencer really does, but to also hear her journey. So Hope, welcome on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be on the season finale of season 3.
Well, a great way to end it. So Hope, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and your journey and how you got to be doing what you are today?
Yeah, so I started out in tourism, was my degree in school, all because I wanted to be a Disney princess. So I solely...
Who doesn't?
solely picked my career path because my high school choir teacher, I said I wanted to be a Disney princess, and I was like, maybe perform on cruise ships. And she was like, well, the community college down the street has a tourism program. So I was like, sounds great. Did absolutely no research. I was like, that sounds fun. And made it through my associates. I never was hired at Disney. I was rejected 4 times. And
their loss, Hope. It's their loss.
Well, I like to share that part because I think that I'm very fortunate to have, at this point in time, like a fairly public career that looks like it's been easy, but I've faced a lot of rejection. So I like to share that the career path I thought I was going to have working for Disney World is not at all what it turned out to be. Not in a bad way, just not the original plan. So when I was at MCC, I started my account ROC the City with Hope after I interned with Visit Rochester. I was at Lilac Festival, Jazz Fest, Cornhill Arts Fest, working with visitors and helping them plan other things to do while they were in town for the festival. And then when my internship finished up, I was like, hey, I like telling people things to do about Rochester. So my mom came up with the name ROC the City with Hope, and my first video was July 14th, 2017 at the #1 tourist destination in Rochester. Do you have any guesses what that is?
I am going to guess it's something related to Susan B. Anthony.
Nope.
Okay, what is it?
It is the Pittsford Wegmans.
Of course it is. Of course it is. For people who don't know, who aren't from New York or the East Coast, Wegmans is sort of this mecca grocery store that's always in the top 100 businesses in America for employees. So that's Wegmans.
And it's where all people bring their family and friends when they come into town. So that's where I launched my YouTube career. And then over time, it transitioned to Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. TikTok's my biggest platform. I was about 26,000 followers over there, and I've had over 10 million views on my content, all talking
Amazing.
Positively about Rochester.
That's amazing. Well, Rochester region owes you a debt of gratitude. So a couple of things there that I really want to dig into before you define for us what an influencer really does. But there is this sense of, you hear overnight sensation, right? You hear it with bands all the time, like, oh my gosh, they, are an overnight smash. They're a #1 hit, but they've been on the road nonstop for 10 years, right? So you talked about rejection. How did you keep going when you're trying to figure out this world of, being an influencer and social media, yet you're getting job rejections and putting yourself out there for people? How do you keep going when you encounter those hiccups?
I think I've been fortunate that I've always, whenever there's been a rejection, there's always been a reason that felt like came shortly after. So throughout my Disney rejections that I faced in college, there was a new opportunity that came up the next semester. And I was like, well, I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I been in Florida. So I've been fortunate that if I just waited a little bit longer after that rejection, it was like, oh, this is why. Like the bigger
Yeah.
picture of, had I done that, I'm sure there would have been great things that would have happened. But this thing that's happening right now wouldn't have happened either.
Yeah, I was just listening to the Smartless podcast, which is Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes, and they were interviewing Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker fame, and he said he had this role. He was on a TV show. They did 13 episodes. He absolutely loved it, and it got canceled. And he was, despondent, and all of a sudden, shortly thereafter, he gets the role of Luke Skywalker, and he wouldn't have been able to do that had his show been picked up for a second season. So it's that sort of like sliding doors, or when one door opens, a window opens, a window closes, a door closes, another one opens, whatever the metaphor. But so you kept going by seeing what was next.
Well, in similar vein, local star Kristen Wiig, who's on SNL,
Yep.
I just auditioned for a local community theater show, and the director was a teacher at Brighton for a long time, which is where Kristen Wiig went. He said, I'm no indicator of talent because I passed over Kristen Wiig for every single show. He didn't cast her in a single show. And she's one of the most famous actresses there is.
Yeah. Shout out Kristen Wiig, born and raised in Canandaigua, and went to school in Brighton before leaving. Yes. So that is amazing, right? That is truly amazing. So help my audience understand a little bit more. What is an influencer really? I mean, I don't want to sound like, the 80-year-old guy out of touch. I get it, but help us understand a little bit more really what that means to you.
Yeah. So my definition would be I've built a community. Most influencers will pick a niche that they focus on. So my niche that I've leaned into is things to do around Rochester, New York. Other people, there's beauty influencers, fashion influencers, basically any niche that you can think of. And you share content and then influence people to either purchase a product or to make choices. So usually the influencing that I do is sharing local businesses and things to do around Rochester, hoping that they will go and patronize those businesses.
Mm-hmm. What is that? So you mentioned community, which I love that word. How do you really build that community? It can't be as simple as, I know I'm doing it. I've got a podcast and I'm putting content out, and you hope, people listen or see it or find it. How do you go about really cementing those relationships to drive that continuous engagement?
I think is it Gary Vaynerchuk? He, a long time ago, had talked about serve, sell. And I think that I've really tried to focus on what information can I share that's really serving my audience. So it's not all about me, like, oh, look at these great things. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this awesome park that we have in Rochester. Look at all these different bodies of water that we can go visit, and really focusing on ways that I can help somebody and that someone's going to get something out of reading my content.
Yeah, there's a value exchange there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you most enjoy about and now you have a day job too, right? So, but on the influencer side, what do you enjoy most about that work?
It's been so amazing getting to meet people out in the real world, in the community, off of our phones, and how many people have told me that they have moved to Rochester because they found my account.
Wow.
We're up to a handful of people who have said that maybe they were from the area, weren't sure about moving back. One woman, she grew up here, was living in South Carolina, and her boyfriend, they were debating where to go, and she used my page as a way to be like, here's why you should move to Rochester. So I've met at least 10 people who have told me that they've moved because they found my account. And if they were looking at different job opportunities across the country, it was my page that helped solidify them coming to the region.
What does that feel like?
I kind of feel like, if somebody wanted to put a statue up in my honor, give me the key to the city.
Mayor Evans, if you're listening, let's get that key ready.
I mean, I'm not going to beg for it, but if, I don't need to a pay or anything, just, some recognition.
But that really is extraordinary. I mean, it's not one, it's not two. A notable number of people have said, wow, your content helped me see what was here. And I think that's really fascinating because I think, it's funny you mentioned Kristen Wiig. One of her friends growing up in Brighton, Sarah Hannah, is a good friend of mine. It's 6 degrees of separation. I was literally thinking about this, Hope, before the podcast. So it's so weird that you mentioned that. But my friend Sarah Hannah is a really successful photographer in Atlanta. And I don't know if it's Buckhead Magazine or Atlanta Magazine does an annual 100 Most Beautiful People. And my friend Sarah photographs a lot of the people that are in there. And so I happened to be at the airport and I was flipping through it. And half of the women listed their career as influencer. And it really is, I have to say, there is this visceral response oh, an influencer, right? Oh, that's the job, right? But it was for me such a sea change that so many people, it was almost validation that that's real, the influencer job is real. But you've clearly demonstrated an impact that you're having on the lives of the people who listen and watch, and also the communities that you're serving, which again, you said serve. How does that impact the type of content you put together? That sort of, pressure or responsibility, or maybe you don't feel that at all?
It's definitely been a balance. The larger my account has grown, to be fairly compensated for the work that I've done, and also continuing to provide for the community that I've created. So it's been a struggle of trying to figure out, this tightrope of being compensated by businesses who are going to get customers, and also making sure that I'm still providing, timely information for the followers that I've gained. So in the last year, I've put together a couple of digital magazines as additional ways to try and serve content. So I did a locals digital guide to Rochester, a fall edition, holiday edition, and winter edition, just kind of going through my perspective of here's, what I think. And it was an additional way for me to kind of touch base with the consumer in a way that was unfiltered versus here's, the paid polished version of I want you to go to this business. So it's been definitely a consistent learning curve, and then also trying to make sure that even when I am being paid, still maintaining that authenticity. So it may be they sell burgers versus this is the best burger I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
Making sure that, reading between the lines information is there when I'm sharing about businesses.
Yeah. And, there's a theory in public relations that every action you take is putting money in a trust bank with your audience, right? And that takes a long time. It's incremental, it's nickels, it's pennies, it's dimes, and you can lose that entire account in the drop of a hat. And, I've seen that where all of a sudden you're like, oh, that person on Instagram is now clearly getting paid. Even though it says sponsored content, the tone has changed. It is the best. And so your audience, I'm assuming I know who your demographic is, but they're really savvy and really cynical about that paid content. So that must be a really tough balance to try and figure out.
Yeah, it's definitely a consistent learning experience. Even when I use language sometimes provided by an organization, there's been a couple historical museums that have asked me to use historically appropriate language that isn't necessarily appropriate today. That has been, something in the comments that people will call out and be like, that's not appropriate. I'm like, wow. This is the language that was approved, that was, asked to be used by a museum. So every day it's a new PR learning experience that I didn't have any PR background. The most PR knowledge I have is from your teachings at the chamber.
Yes, and I should share for folks that that's where Hope and I met. She worked at the Ontario County Chamber, where I was on the board, and then served as an outsourced executive for a little while. Well, I appreciate the shout out. That to me is the other thing of the other side of social media is it can be a really toxic environment. How do you stay positive? How do you, stay above the keyboard warriors who want to critique everything, maybe rightfully want to try to point out that's the wrong language or whatever? How do you stay positive and navigate all of that?
I'm very thankful for the hide comment button that makes people feel like their voice has been heard because they still see it, but maybe not everyone else does. That filtering words. And then on Instagram specifically, I was able to make it so only my followers could comment. It's not a free for all for anyone. And those three things have definitely been helpful. I'm fortunate that for the most part, if there's been a negative comment, usually it's not about me directly. They may say that an area of the city isn't safe and they're trying to, be helpful to somebody reading the information, but it's this navigation of, okay, like, is this the most appropriate information? Is this the most helpful thing to be on there? So definitely a lot of filtering that goes on in the comment section.
Yeah. What would be one thing that really would surprise people about your role as an influencer?
Probably there's a lot more admin work than I think people realize. I think that, and I didn't know it either, I thought that the bigger my accounts got, that it would be the more videos I would get to do, but really it's like trying to figure out supply demand. Is this the most appropriate for my brand? Do my followers care? And kind of like scheduling admin stuff, I would say, is probably like the most. Actually recording videos and being on site is now like the smallest percentage, kind of like a photographer, like people who are photographers. It's like, okay, your shoot that you did that week is like the smallest amount of time that you actually spent working as a photographer that week.
Yeah, I remember it, and I would baffle my friends and family, but I used to be a on-camera spokesperson for Walmart, and I'd work for a month to set up an interview with CNN and for them to come to a store, and we'd have a whole thing planned out, and it's a full day exercise, and you've got store managers trained, and you're doing all of this. And then it's like, a minute and a half story. And it's like, people don't understand the work that went into how you put that all together. It's just, I popped up on camera and, said a few things and that was the story. And it doesn't work that way. And so I understand that role of it, that side of it. It's a challenge. So at what point, Hope, do you feel like, wow, this influencer thing could be a real career pathway for me? It's a real thing. It's not just a fun hobby, or it's not to diminish it, right? You started out with this is interesting and it's fun, and I don't think you imagined I'd have 23 million views, right? At what point does that light bulb go off, and what is that like?
So I had begun posting a lot during COVID shutdown. People couldn't go anywhere, and it was like, okay, the perfect time to explore your hometown is right now.
Yeah.
So going from that, I had a video go viral. I went up to 10,000 followers in like a week, posting about a local DIY candle shop bar in downtown Rochester. And then from there, I was like, okay, so maybe I can start asking places if I can go in for free in exchange for posting rather than like me paying to go places.
So that was the first step. Yeah.
And then, because for a long time I was like, what is the value to the business? Like, if I don't have anyone to view the content, what's it worth for them to provide me with in-kind services? And then Glass Fest, which happens in Corning, New York every year, they had reached out. And I was like, well, I'm not charging right now, as long as, things are in kind. And they're like, well, we have a budget line for an influencer, so you're getting paid no matter what because it's in our budget. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, I guess I can start charging now.
Did that change your perspective on the work then? Or did it become work?
Yeah, I think at that point I was like, okay, other people are seeing it as a value and I can treat it as a business as opposed to a hobby.
Yeah. So, you do have this really amazing other job, which I'd love to learn more about and hear about, is your radio show production. Boy, talk about the two ends of the media spectrum, right? Like radio, which has changed, but still, terrestrial radio has been around for a long time and really on the cutting edge of social media. But how has your media notoriety directed or impacted that career arc or that other stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so I was interviewed on the P Morning Coffee Club a couple of years ago in August, just to talk about things to do in Rochester. And then it turned into, well, what can you talk about other than just Rochester? And I was like, I don't know. What do you want to talk about? So we were talking about Buffalo Bills training camp, and I jumped in on the conversation, said, oh yeah, during training camp, I drove over to St. John Fisher University, which is where the Bills training camp is held, and parked my car, lowered my dating apps down to 1 mile, and was trying to match with the Bills player on a dating app. And they thought that that was so funny that I got a call a couple hours later, and they were like, hey, have you ever thought about working in radio? And here we are.
Yeah. And you get that question and your first thought is?
Well, I actually had applied a couple of times prior, kind of as a joke, like, wouldn't it be funny if, it worked out? I was like, I have storytelling skills. I studied tourism. I was a tour guide for a long time. I was like, I can tell a story. So I'd kind of applied like as a, wouldn't it be funny if, a couple of times and never heard back. But then all of the sudden they saw my social media channels and a way that, I could, as a younger person, bring in a new perspective into radio.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Do you get a sense that the radio industry, on a scale of 10, like 10, they've got it figured out, a scale of 1, they're clueless. Do you think, where are they on that spectrum of really understanding the power of social media and using it?
I think definitely a 10. They definitely understand the importance of it. We are posting constantly on our Facebook page, from camera interviews like we're doing here. We are constantly taping all of our segments, trying to cut it down and posting them into videos, teasing our podcast episodes that we will upload different segments from the day. So that's actually a large part of my role as the producer, is working as the social media manager.
So how much of your time is on air versus the production and content side?
So I have since kind of transitioned more into an on-air personality than producer. Originally, they were like, okay, we don't know where this is going to go, so we'll have her behind the scenes. And, if she's funny, then we'll kind of see how it goes. So I inched my way in to being a bigger part of the cast in the morning. So on the show, we're on from 5:30 to 10, and I'm on almost every single break. And then once the show wraps up, it's planning content for the next day and going through and kind of scheduling out all of that social media.
So you don't have to answer this question. You can deflect. You're a media pro. But I do remember a friend of mine back in the day when I lived in Atlanta was on The Real World. She came and was on an on-air personality on The Breakfast Show on one of the bigger Atlanta radio stations. And she was sort of like the straight person, like she showed up as who she was, but a couple of the people on the show were playing characters, right? They were versions of themselves. Where are you on that? Who shows up on that show? Hope? ROC the City with Hope? Or a little bit dramatized version of Hope?
A dramatized princess version of Hope. So I think that my favorite part about my job being as an on-air personality is that all of the things that growing up I was told I was too much for, I get celebrated, and I get to play around joking about like being dramatic, joking about being the center of attention, like joking that I'm a princess and all these things that I was told like, okay, that's not appropriate. I get to be celebrated and people get to laugh at it. So it is myself. It is a more dramatic version than I would be with regular people, but it's still like from the core of who I am.
And I appreciate, Hope, your authenticity. I'm sure our listeners will hear it, but it shines through. And, I think playing a bit of a dramatized version, you've earned that, and it's a character. But do you find now that you are a bit of a personality that people know, has that shown up in a way that you're like, in person, that you're like, oh no, that was a bit, that was, Princess Hope. That's not, me Hope. Have you encountered that?
Yes. So we talked about my dating life a lot on the show, and we joked about that I wanted to do 75 hard because you couldn't drink alcohol. And I was like, well, I can't get in trouble drunk texting any of my exes if I'm not drinking during 75 hard. And I was at a wedding that listeners were at, and they were talking about like not letting me have any drinks and that they were going to steal my phone so I couldn't text any of my exes. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like, this was for like comedic effect. Like,
Yeah.
It's a joke. So they were having a hard time wrapping their heads around. They were ready to make sure that I didn't get myself into any trouble at that wedding.
Get the keys, get the phone, and keep an eye out. Fair enough. So what do you think the future of influencing is?
I don't think it's going away. I think that more and more businesses are open to the idea. I think that more and more people are seeing it as a career path and as a trusted source. I think it's just going to continue to grow as an industry. My hope is that because it's a woman-dominated industry at this point in time, that people take it more seriously more quickly. I think that, like, you had made the comment about the 100 Most Beautiful People magazine, how many of them were influencers. Yeah. It's not a well-respected profession by a lot of people still. And, I appreciate you saying I'm a marketing professional because I have garnished, I have seen the conversion of posting a video and seeing people go and patronize that business. The last 2 years, I've helped a local museum break records with their fundraisers from posting about their events. So I'm like, okay, the proof is in the pudding. It's here.
Yeah.
I just need, it to become more of a accepted universal position.
Yeah, and it's part of why I wanted to have you on, right? I've been a bit cheeky, and we've talked about, 100 Most Beautiful People and that sort of thing, but it is a real tool. I'm a public relations professional, and figuring out social media and leveraging the tools at your disposal to break through all this white noise, it's important, and it is an important tool that I think you're right, more businesses are opening up to. And by the way, businesses would kill to have the numbers and the views that you do, right? So that's a real tangible thing, to your point. I remember back in the day when I started in politics 100 years ago, they would say you needed to have 8 name recognition. So you had to have a commercial appear 8 times or be in the newspaper 8 times for someone to just recognize your name. And now with all the white noise out there, it's exponentially higher. So, being able to leverage people like you. And so I kind of wanted to help people understand a little bit more, dispel, but as a communications professional, help people understand this is a tool that, not to say humans are tools, but the work you do is a great marketing tool that people should consider putting in their basket.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So we'll pivot to a couple last questions. How do you stay fresh and motivated and up on the latest trends?
I consume a lot of social media. So it's definitely a balance of unplugging and then kind of having like my entrepreneur hat on when I'm scrolling through and seeing different trends that are going on and trying to figure out how I can apply those trends to my page and to my brand. So I think there's definitely a little bit of a mindset there. And then I forgot the other part of the question.
Fresh and motivated. How do you stay motivated? And
that, and I've really been working on my physical health. And that, I think, has been a big component of just having more energy to stay awake. It's been, I don't want to say a struggle, but being on air, we have 18 talking breaks a day. No matter what, we have to have, between the 3 of us, we're talking 18 times. And then also going and finding things to talk about on social media. So there's got to be time to unplug and to do nothing in order to recharge that battery and refine that creativity.
By the way, you said something, and I'm totally going to use it next time my wife Audrey sees me like doom scrolling. I'm going to be like, "Don't you see the entrepreneur hat? I'm doing research. I'm doing research here." What's next for you?
Oh, I don't know what's next at this point in time. For the last 8 years, it's just kind of been things are coming my way, whether I go out of my way to find them or not. So I've kind of been enjoying the last year and a half. There hasn't been a huge ripple. It's just kind of been enjoying what's been built. I am putting together ROC the City Choice Awards as a way to promote some local businesses that have started since January of 2020, because to start a business since January 2020 and still be going strong.
Amazing.
So that's the next project that'll be launching in the next week or so, and those winners will be announced in May. But just trying to find some different ways to continue to create content, support businesses, support consumers, get paid, the constant circle of trying to help everybody win.
Well, I truly, I know the community appreciates, but, truly value your approach to really wanting to support and shine a light on small businesses. They're so critical to our world and community. So we'll ask this last question. It's the one I ask of everyone. What advice do you have, for others who are trying to find their passion or getting started in the next thing that they're hopeful will be a career or a meaningful hobby?
I think the main thing is just figuring out, once you find something that you're passionate about, like, it's okay for it not to be an initial moneymaker. It's okay to do something for fun. And if it turns into a business, that's great. But I think there's so many people right now on social media. It's like, do this and you'll make money. Do this and you'll make money. Do this and you'll make money. And it's like, go to the Dollar Tree and pick up books and then resell them on Amazon. And it's like, whoa. It's like, take some time, find a, creative outlet, whatever that is. And it's okay to have fun, and then let, your inner child find something
or
and
your
kind of
inner
go from
princess.
there. Tomato, my inner child's the biggest princess.
I love it. Well, Hope, this is awesome. I'm truly thrilled to see you blossoming and the growth that you've just, it's almost like you've been shot out of a cannon the last couple of years, and it's just really been great to watch. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been so great to catch up again.
Well, good. And folks, this is the Walk On Podcast. People leading with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on. Thanks again, Hope.